Well, welcome back to part 3. If you remember, we left the turbine rotor nuts loose in the previous recordings, so I'm going to go back and actually attempt to get those tight. I've decided to use 12 Newton meters, with them being M6 bolts, where I think we should be okay. Once I've actually got up to that torque, I'm then going to give them 1/8 of a turn each, just to take them up a little bit. Now they are stretch bolts, but unfortunately we can't get new bolts or any details from Russia, and we're having to use the old ones. Unfortunately, the rotor shaft is actually quite loose and it keeps turning, so we're going to need to put a piece of soft metal between the nuts to hold it in position whilst we torque them up. Each bolt needs to be carefully tightened, using a diagonal pattern. That's how I normally do it, and then turn the rotor. Be careful not to jam anything into the fins, you'll only damage the turbine rotor if you do, or the actual protective surfaces. Remember to keep the surfaces clean, where possible wipe any swarf or components out, you don't want them falling back into the engine. Once you've got the bolts tight, remember to tighten the tabs. The tabs should be on the inside, pulling up to the bolt. The idea being is once the engine core is spun up to speed, the centrifugal force will try and push the tabs further out. If you put the tabs on the outside, they potentially could come undone. Now we're ready to put the exhaust nozzle on. It's quite an important part. This keeps all of the heat directed straight out the back of the engine. There's a couple of cutouts to actually line up with the various bolts. There's also oil vapour coming from where the main bearings are. This is directed out through the pipes and into the exhaust nozzle, and the actual vapour is burnt off once the flame comes out the back. Time for washers. A series of nuts. Notice there's no gasket between the two. This is the original frame that the engine came in. I don't know whether it was actually made this way specifically for the engine or whether it's a retrofit by somebody else. It's been in storage for quite some time, so what I've had to do here is block off the oil pipe ways and fuel ways. Otherwise we end up getting creepy crawlies and all sorts in there. It's caused major problems with aircraft as well, with bugs climbing into sensor ports and what have you. It's a good idea if you're not going to be working for a while to make sure you cap these off. Like I say, it's been nearly a year now since I've actually been able to get back to this, mainly because I've had to make a lot of small parts. But anyway, we're back ready to go, and I'm going to lift the main engine section onto the drive spindle. This is where the electric motor sits on the other side, so we'll cover that a little bit later. So this is very similar to a clutch being added to a car, where the actual spindle has to go just in the right place. The packing, make sure you get enough underneath it to give it roughly the right level. Unfortunately, the hook on the top doesn't actually have a good centre of balance, so the whole thing swings out of place. So I've actually used just some packing blocks underneath. So once you've got this about right, it's just a matter of actually jiggling it on and getting the actual lugs to line up and actually get those pushed together. And after much struggling that you haven't seen, the drive and the engine together, there we go. And it's just a matter of actually adding the nuts on now. There's a bit of a knack to getting these screws on. Try and doing that first time, it's not always easy. And the main engine supports are now in place. That's that holds the engine free up in the air so I can get the pipes on. It's a matter of deciding which pipes. So let's use Mama's best baking tray. We'll go for the small pipes first, but because these pipes have been hanging around for quite a while, there's no idea what's actually been inside these or whether dust collected, and I don't want it in the engine. So I'm going to use isopropanol and a flushing syringe and a couple of pipe cleaners. So first off, let's use a bit of this. And this will give you some idea how mucky it is. So it's not too bad. This is the main oil pipe that goes to the pressure gauge. Oil pressure. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a bit there. And that one's ready to go. And this one, this is the lowest sump, the scavenging pipe. So it actually brings the oil back out of from where the bearings are. As it settles down at the bottom, and the pump sucks it out and pushes it back up into the main oil tank. There's probably got a lot of muck in this one because I've not cleaned it for a while. But yeah, you can see it's actually a bit muckier than expected. All we're trying to do is just loosen off any of that muck that's in there. And save it going back through the oil pump, which will score the veins on the pump. Yeah, that sounds good. This is the same for all the pipes. Get down as far as you can. Careful not to lose your pipe cleaner inside the pipe. Okay. Clean rags where possible, and it's isopropanol, so it will actually dilute or water down the oil, so it's glad to let them dry out. Now, once you finish cleaning, obviously your cleaning fluid or isopropanol is going to get mucky, but you'll notice here there's hardly any muck at all. If you've got a lot of muck, then you need to start all over again. The pipe should be reasonably clean to start with, and if they are mucky, you're going to need to go through the process again and again until you've got it nice and clean. There's a little bit of sediment. These are the little bits of dust that we've collected. That's actually what we've been trying to remove. That the actual main muck, you should be doing that with other cleaning fluids and what have you, really. This process is just before final build, and we're just getting rid of those little tiny bits, make sure they don't get into oilways. Some of these pipes can be rather tricky to install. Trying to remember which way they go in. Most pipes have fittings just to take up the vibration, try and stop them being damaged once they're running. Because you can get fatigue in them as well. That's why I said you shouldn't really bend them. They should be pretty much spot on fit. If metal is actually vibrated whilst it's under stress, it actually generates small cracks. That's called fatigue. And as the time goes on, the crack gets bigger, and if it's an oil pipe, obviously oil comes out. Fuel line, same thing. You certainly don't want that happening with one of these things, and you don't want to go near them when they're actually running at high speed. Hear a gritty sound or feel when you tighten the unions up. That normally means you've got muck in the threads and it's grinding against the nuts. If that happens, it's best to take the pipes off and wash the unions with isopropanol or something just to get them clean. Otherwise you'll end up binding the threads or damaging them. So the ignition cord for the spark plug. Good. Other than connecting up the little clips and what have you, we're about done. So this is the final build. This is where we got to, the culmination of all our videos. We've got a few little problems left over to sort out. Found a few problems with the pipes. Some of the high pressure fuel lines have got fractures, so we'll have to sort those out before we start it. I've got to connect all of the electronics, the external electronics, the battery, the controller, And once all that's done, we'll take it all over to our friendly farmer who's allowed to use his field, and we'll give it a go and try and start it. So keep an eye out for further videos, and hopefully you'll be able to see the thing turning and burning.